Wisconsin tax law. During tax years 2020 and 2021, most taxpayers received an economic impact payment from the federal government. These payments are not taxable for federal or state, and they are not includable in calculating the homestead credit. All CAP Services VITA volunteers are given a Wisconsin Department of Revenue training guide. These guides were designed to be evergreen. Updates will be received as replacement pages for any tax law changes. If you have not yet received your training guide or the corresponding training workbook, please contact your site coordinator. This presentation is not intended to replace the training guide. The guide is not long, but is packed with important information. Please devote enough time to studying the Wisconsin Training Guide in order to be comfortable preparing Wisconsin returns. Quick tips. The Wisconsin filing status will be the same as the federal filing status, with the exception of qualifying widower. A qualifying widower may qualify as head of household for Wisconsin purposes. The mailing address may not always be the same as the actual location of the property. The mailing address can be a post office box. Also, the property may be located in a small municipality that does not have a post office. These properties often use a neighboring city as their mailing address. Also, Social Security is always exempt from Wisconsin tax. If a taxpayer is filing Federal Form 8379, Injured Spouse Allocation, choose the appropriate code in the state section of TaxSlayer, Basic Information, Special Condition Code. United States government interest is taxable for federal but exempt for Wisconsin. Typically, we see savings bond interest on the 1099-INT interest in box 3. Towards the bottom of the interest section in TaxSlayer, you will find this box. Enter the amount from box 3 here in order to eliminate it from taxable income for Wisconsin. Most common other subtractions. You will find these in the state section of TaxSlayer. Here are just a few of the more common subtractions. Long-term care insurance is a 100% deduction for the state of Wisconsin. You also need to manually enter the amount of the tuition and fees expenses. Military pensions, those who receive 1099-Rs from the Defense Finance and Accounting Service are exempt. There is a disability exclusion. There is also a retirement income exclusion. TaxSlayer will automatically handle only the IRA distributions. Other types of retirement distributions need to be manually entered. You also have to manually enter the child and dependent care expenses. This is the screen in TaxSlayer where you would click to find the drop-down for the other subtractions entry. Here you can see the many other expenses, tuition and fees, military, and so on. This is where you would enter those figures. Common Wisconsin tax credits. This is a list of the more common tax credits we see at our VITA sites. Other credits exist, and you will find those in the training manual. Renters and homeowners school property tax credit. The married couple credit. This credit automatically pulls forward from the federal entries. The earned income credit. This is also calculated by TaxSlayer. However, unlike the federal rules on the earned income credit, you must use your 2021 federal earned income when computing the Wisconsin Earned Income Credit. The Homestead Credit. This credit will be discussed in a standalone tutorial. The Eligible Veterans and Surviving Spouses Property Tax Credit. Renters and Homeowners School Property Tax Credit. This credit is typically a source of confusion for volunteers. This credit is calculated by rent and property taxes actually paid during the year for the taxpayer's primary residence. In order for this credit to calculate properly, the credit needs to be entered manually. If the taxes paid entered into the federal section are for the primary residence only, nothing more needs to be done. The credit will calculate from whatever is entered in that field. If the taxpayer paid real estate taxes on properties other than their primary residence, you will need to adjust that amount down to the correct amount. The taxpayer cannot claim this credit if the taxpayer is applying for the Eligible Veterans and Surviving Spouses Property Tax Credit. This is the screen from TaxSlayer where you will enter the rent paid. Be sure to enter in the correct field designated for whether the heat was included in the rent or if the heat was not included in the rent. This real estate tax field at the bottom is only to be used if an adjustment needs to be made to the amount of real estate taxes paid that were entered in the federal section. This credit can only be calculated on the real estate taxes actually paid for the taxpayer's primary residence. Eligible Veterans and Surviving Spouses Property Tax Credit. The veteran or an unremarried surviving spouse must have certification from the Wisconsin Department of Veterans Affairs. If this credit is claimed, the taxpayer cannot claim the homestead credit, the school property tax credit, or the farmland preservation credit. With this credit, the property taxes must be paid. The credit is to be calculated on the home and 1 acre. Additional acreage must be adjusted out. The taxpayer must provide a copy of the tax bill and also a copy of the receipt showing that it was paid. These need to be submitted with the return. It is possible there will be no income on this return because military payments are never taxable for Wisconsin. This is the screen where the credit is claimed. You will need to manually enter the credit in the bottom field. The credit is on the primary residence and 1 acre of land. If the taxpayer has more than 1 acre, you must adjust the credit by using the worksheet found in Wisconsin Form 1 instructions. You will also need to do a calculation if the bill contains agricultural land. This is a copy of the worksheets that you will use to do so. Read and study. Be sure to study the Homestead Credit standalone presentation. You'll be glad you did. Wisconsin returns are sometimes considered difficult. Be sure to devote enough study time so that you feel comfortable when you are preparing these returns.